Hello and welcome to Unwatchables, the film podcast where you should be afraid, very afraid. I am Marc Dottavio.
I'm Seth Troyer.
And today we are joined by writer, director, and novelist Bobby Miller for the one filmmaker most synonymous with the term body horror. That filmmaker, of course, is David Cronenberg, and we will be discussing what may be his masterpieces, two films that blend horror, science fiction, and grand tragedy in ways that churn your emotions and your stomach. They are 1986's existential sci-fi monster movie, The Fly, and 1988's twisted psychological thriller about twin gynecologists losing their minds, Dead Ringers. And today, our very own ringer is Bobby Miller. He has directed horror films like Critters Attack and 2016's The Cleanse, starring Johnny Galecki and Angelica Huston. His new genre-bending comic novel, Situation Nowhere, can be pre-ordered now at situationnowhere.com. And I believe this is coming out sometime in March 2025. Is that right, Bobby?
Yes, that is true.
All right. Through Maudlin House, which we've had some other people associated with that.
That's some real shit.
Publishing entity on here. That's been a lot of fun. We've had a lot of cool authors on. But reading about what you've provided me of this novel doesn't sound like it's horror.
Yeah, it's kind of all over the place. Like there's definitely like Terry Gilliam's Brazil in there. There's a little Idiocracy. And then I would say the most horror is kind of like Larry Cohen's The Stuff. Are you guys familiar with that movie?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Stuff.
Yeah. So I would say that's kind of the swirled up thing. I mean, what's great about writing a book is that there's no budget limitations. So I could just kind of go on one. So it's kind of all those things.
Okay. Is it accurate to say that you're like a horror guy? That seems to be what I associate you with, but
yeah, I mean, I grew up very much a comedy person, like Zucker Brothers, Fairley Brothers, pretty much anyone that were brothers and doing comedy. Right. And it wasn't until late that I really got into horror. Like I think the biggest horror stuff for me growing up was like gateway horror films like Gremlins or Beetlejuice. And then Cronenberg kind of happened to me late and kind of definitely changed the course of what I did as a filmmaker and definitely influenced The Cleanse. So yeah, I came late.
Yeah, watching The Cleanse, that was the first thing that came to my mind was like, oh, of course he picked Cronenberg.
Yes.
I could totally see the, we've got body horror, we've got, I don't know, little like kind of cute but gross like puppets and special effects work. And of course you saying stuff like Gremlins and getting to make your own Critters film. I mean, what is that? Like
The Brood is kind of crittery.
I grew up. Sure. But I mean, like I grew up watching those Critters movies, and I don't know, were you like a fan?
Oh, for sure.
Going into that, I was
Yeah. No, it was funny because the place that owned the rights, I would go for these general meetings out in Hollywood, and they would, and I'd keep coming in, and there was like a critter in their bathroom, and I was like, "Are you guys doing anything with critters?" And they kept saying, I don't know. And so I was like for years and years, bathroom. And then there's literally, it was like a critter toothbrush holder. And I was like, are you guys going to ever do anything with critters?
Was there a ghoulie in the toilet?
That's what I didn't take a shit in there, so I'm not sure.
Okay, it might have been.
One could have popped up. But yeah, so it was just like it was just very random. And then they called me. And of course it was like, can you fly to South Africa tomorrow? It was like super, it was like, Warner Brothers / sci-fi. And so it was a very quickie movie. And I was like, okay. Yeah, I can do that. So it was
South
like
Africa.
Yeah, well, it was hilarious because they were like, "This needs to look like Middle America," and I'm like, "So we're flying, we're flying to South
Why are we going
Africa?"
there?
Apparently, it's very cheap there.
There you
Very
go.
cheap.
Okay.
Right.
It's just very
But
expensive to get everybody and everything there, probably.
well,
That's the
yeah.
only
So
thing.
I just worked with local crew there. So it
Mhm.
was weird because I was like, I guess I'm doing my Roger Corman movie second. Like you're supposed to do that first to warm up to your movie. I was like, I guess I'm gonna do it second now because this is like super quick. And but I tried to like get because being a fan of Joe Dante, I know one of his tricks was he would hire the writer as an actor so that they would fly him out to set. And I tried to do that, and they were like, "No, there's no money for that." So I was just like, oh, "Okay, I guess I can't do that." But yeah,
Well, yeah, that's awesome. And I don't know, when it comes to Cronenberg, then was it these particular movies? I mean, I know The Fly kind of is in there with those gooey monster and special effect movies like you were bringing up, but also, he's had such like a big career. I think I've seen all of his movies by now. I think I might have missed that very first like original Crimes of the Future, but where are you coming from in terms of Cronenberg as a whole?
I mean, he's huge for me. The Fly is my favorite of his, hands down. And I think it was in college. I just like started watching all of his films, and that's why it'll be interesting to talk about Dead Ringers because I had a particular experience with Dead Ringers that first time. But The Fly, I just instantly was my jam, and for all the reasons I'm sure we'll get into. But yeah, I mean, actually, before I started the cleanse, Johnny Galecki, I don't know how the hell this happened, but they actually got a poster to Cronenberg to sign. And like the day before the shoot, they presented me, like the producers presented me with a poster that said like "Best of luck, David Cronenberg." And I was like, I almost started crying.
That's
It's like,
so sweet. They
I
want you to
know
succeed.
it was so
Wow.
great, like so yeah, he definitely looms large, and The Fly is a very special movie to me.
Now, have you seen the original 1958 The Fly?
I mean, when I was a kid, and all I can remember is it's a little different tonally.
A little bit.
Yeah.
I actually
Just a
like it
little
quite a
bit.
bit. That's a good one. Very Twilight Zone. Most of it's in a basement. I love any
Yeah.
movie where it's just like, we got a location. We're gonna shoot a movie in it, and it's
Yeah.
gonna be in that location. And he's got a killer face. Love his fly ass
Yeah,
face.
I mean, it's very iconic for sure.
Yeah, the way he actually turns into a fly is much more literal
Yes.
in that, but it is a fun, goofy, like, low budget horror movie. And it's so funny, I guess, based on this film's reputation, I think a lot of people who maybe are watching it like for the first time now would be surprised to find that it's it's so existential. And in my mind, this and Dead Ringers, in a way, are like doomed love stories above all.
Yes.
And
Mhm.
They're bummers.
Well, it's funny.
uh
I think that also uh both of these movies, particularly The Fly, is kind of there's a bit of a kind of a fuck you ending, in terms of like because you
mhm.
think about that first scene, and this is what I think Cronenberg is so good at is I'm so instantly on board with Jeff Goldblum in that first scene. He's just like a charming weirdo, and I know he's setting me up to really be devastated by that ending. And I think he's just so good at kind of setting these things in motion and being so careful with character, that for me the magic trick is like how this is such a fucking a goopy movie, and there's so much body horror stuff, but at the end of the day it's to me devastating for exactly what you're talking about, this doomed romance ending. But there is something about the way it sorry, am I jumping? I'm already jumping to the end.
No, go for it.
But there's just something about the ending that's just like just fades and you're like, fuck. I have that Cronenberg on Cronenberg book, and I guess they tried to put a coda on the end of the film, but they were just like, there's no coming back from that ending. That people were just like, could not pivot to something else after that.
They like
which I think is kind of
refuse to
funny.
do anything like even just like a haunting the end question mark scene or anything,
Mhm.
you know, or it's like, oh, he's dead. Oh, it's terrible. And then there's like foreshadowing or something is the only thing I could have thought of maybe. But it is just it's so bleak. Again, we are starting with with the ending at the beginning, which is, you know, we're turning the thing inside out like it just came through the pod or
You know
whatever.
what it
But,
was? I just
perfect
listened to your
in the pod.
Irreversible pod, when you talked about Irreversible, and it's got stuck in my head. Now I'm going backwards.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
like a baboon shot through the invention thing.
Mhm. I felt so bad for that baboon
That's rough.
and
Honestly,
his
that's the
baboon
like
brother.
first little hint that you really have that it's Cronenberg. Because I find the beginning of this movie to be like you're like and kind of to what you're saying, Bobby, is just lulling me into this sense of safety or something. Like it doesn't feel immediately like, oh boy, it's gonna get goopy, it's gonna get depressing. It felt so like wacky this time around. Like not just because it's Jeff, but it is because it's Jeff. You know, he's Jeff Goldblum's a silly guy. But even just it's like traditional sci-fi feeling. We go up to his apartment. It's him and a girl. They're having a good time, and he's got these crazy. It feels like you're in an H.G. Wells like short story or something. And he's
Yeah.
got the inventions, and he's a wacky guy, and he's got a little computer, and it's like kind of a ridiculous concept of how it even works and everything. Uh,
Yeah.
so when it does turn black as hell, it is kind of shocking that it does.
I love how this starts. It's so efficient and airtight, the plotting of
Yes.
this movie, and the way that it just throws you right in and does not waste any time. They've already met. We already have Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis in the middle of their kind of meet cute conversation where he's just trying to charm her.
They
This
are
whole
cute.
like most of the movie, at least, you know, as it's getting started, is just this long sequence of him hitting on her
Yeah.
and building it into this little romance. And, you know, Jeff Goldblum isn't the first person you would expect as, you know, in the mad scientist role. He has this like wiry, nerdy charm kind of energy, which I mean, I think works perfectly here. And maybe if I think of it, you know, if you see this as kind of a twisted take on the superhero movie, he's kind of like the, you know, the geeky
Yeah, the Peter Parker.
scientist who then, becomes this alpha male insect. But I love how tightly structured this whole thing is, and it's totally like a two-person show, right? The whole movie is basically like these two characters interacting with each other, and it's
Yeah.
totally about their relationship.
And the I saw it on the big screen a couple years ago, and the other thing that I was really struck by, and I didn't really realize it until I saw it on the big screen, is how operatic it was in terms of it'll just like it'll just build, the music just kind of builds, and then it'll get to like a fade as if like the curtains were coming down on a play or something. And it was really like compelling on the big screen in a way that I'd never experienced on, you know, Blu-ray or whatever. But yeah, it's just such a simple story. And he does such a great job grounding it and making Jeff so charming weirdo. And then yeah, he just kind of slowly gets Cronenberg on your ass.
Why's he
There's
gotta
the
do it?
baboon. He's gonna do
Why's he
it.
gotta do it to
He's
me?
gonna do it. Cronenberg's gonna Cronenberg.
I don't know what
Can't
it
stop
is.
him.
I think I was just I knew what I was getting in for. I had seen it before, but there was something about it this time around. I think I'm just like in a good mood. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I'm with my partner these days and having a good time. And for some reason, Gina Day, you know, you see the person you're into and like the people you see on TV and stuff. And I'm like, Gina Davis reminds me of my sweetheart. Oh, and then Gina Davis has the worst time ever and everything goes
I
bad.
know.
And his name is Seth.
Oh
It's
no.
terrible. Yeah.
So
that's unfortunate.
So this has
So-
been, you've seen it a number of times, right?
I've only seen it one time before this.
Oh, okay.
But this is
I've seen it a number of times.
very few Seth movies in this world. I'll tell you what. I forgot to
Yeah,
decorate. Here's my
you
my
know?
fly. I need to fly. That's better. Ugh.
I'm also like a big fan of obviously the special effects of this movie, and the you know, the prosthetic work is kind of crazy. And also, you know, I know they like built that stage so that when he's climbing around, the stage literally rotates. There's
Mhm.
all this like physical stuff that they do in this movie. And this was like his first, I think, big studio movie for him. So he had this money to do these effects that still, to me, stand the test of time. And, you know, and like you said, there's this existential, I keep thinking about the insect politics speech, you know,
My
where
favorite scene, I think.
yeah, it's just so great. And like, and I noticed this time watching it where it's like, you know, Jeff Goldblum is so iconic. But once that stuff goes on his face, he does seem to recede, and there's almost like a weird, he's more human almost when he becomes the Fly in this movie. And that, if watching that sequence again, like obviously he's doing these little head jerks and stuff to make it feel like he's the Fly, but kind of removed of all his like nuances in his face, he's almost like more human in a weird way as he's getting more grotesque.
Well, yeah, he's so like pitiable at that
Yes.
point. And I think that Jeff Goldblum, you know, obviously he has a very like well-defined screen persona, and
He's
I
more
think
human
that
when he becomes
he
less.
gets
Jeff
even
Goldblum.
more
Yeah.
the more he's vomiting out his, you know, teeth and
Yeah.
That's a
everything.
person.
But I think it's even a kind of underrated performance, even though he's, I think, you know, pretty well associated with this movie, just as it goes on, besides just the physicality of it, that he really does turn him into this tragic figure. And by the time that he is giving that like monologue, that just stops me in my tracks every time. He's in this, you know, this outrageous like makeup at this point where he's like barely looking human, like at all. He looks straight up like a monster, and he's talking about him being an insect who dreamt he was a man.
Yeah.
Every time he says that line, I'm just like get chills.
Yeah.
Yes, the
And,
the insect politics thing is so like
Yeah.
the way he does it too. I think we've all probably come into contact with people, even if you don't know them, if you're just meeting them on the street or something, that are in a different mental place, you know, for lack of a better word. It really tracks and feels true to that. The way he is formulating and like his sentences are breaking down, and the whole like insect politics thing is like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And then it does coalesce into like, oh, it's his twisted, bizarre way of saying, I am struggling not to kill you right now.
Yeah. And that's the other thing, is like, this is a scientist who is like documenting his body falling apart too. And he's trying to wrestle with all this stuff. So like you said, in that moment, he's intellectualizing it in a way that doesn't make sense to us. You know, it makes sense to someone whose fucking fingers are falling off in the bathroom. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
You know,
does.
and then it's like slowly, okay, you know, that I thought that was also like a really great kind of tool to get you inside his brain, is that the fact that he is, you know, he's like interested in this thing that's happening to him in a way that I think Cronenberg is clearly interested in certain, you know, having studied medicine and all that sort of stuff.
Nothing
and
else to do
before
but
he
make
starts,
a museum out of his body parts that have fallen
Right.
Oh
off
God, yeah.
Right.
in his medicine cabinet. And it is just like, oh, this is what you do, right? Really?
And even before he starts to, you know, literally fall apart, it's like he has superpowers all of a sudden. I love that just totally silent scene where he's just going around the lab, like doing gymnastics routine while Gina Davis just kind of sits there like gaping at him, and it cuts away before they even discuss it. And he really captures like a mania to me. Like he really seems like he's running around with this grandiosity and his thoughts going a mile a minute. And I think there's so many different metaphors that people bring to this movie. I think one of them could be something like mania, also like drug abuse, because he has a classic like just kind of coked out way of talking and thinking, and wanting to draw other people into it, right?
Yeah, it starts out
he keeps
fun.
wanting to.
It's like enhancing him, like
Yeah.
drugs do for a little bit, and then it's just like then you're a fucking asshole, and you're trying to make everybody else do it, and trying to make everybody else get in on your level and everything. There is something
the way he
interesting
keeps trying to
about that
teleport her and convince other people to teleport, I thought was really clever. Like I never remembered that. He's like, you got to try this shit.
Yeah.
It's almost like way on the nose drug addict thing. It was just like the pod is the drug,
And it's those scenes like, I never really understood how, I guess I understand that there's like some people find his movies cold or detached. And yes, he has that approach to like violent stuff, just kind of presenting it as is and not making it glamorous. But I find this movie, and particularly these scenes we're talking about, to be funny. I mean, they're funny. He's like kind of going nuts, and with Gina Davis, and he's like putting all the sugar in his coffee. And, like there's these scenes that are just slightly unhinged where it's kind of funny the way he's showing off to her how fit he is. I also know that like Jeff Goldblum, I guess, worked out a ton because he was like, I got to be ripped for this thing.
You can tell.
Yeah. And they were dating at the time as well. So I'm sure that.
Oh,
that
you can
added
tell.
to it.
That
They're
helps.
so sweet together.
Yeah. Because
Yeah,
I
and
think it was his idea to cast her, to consider her.
Yeah, so much of the movie is
Both hella tall.
of the strength of it is these two tall but actors with such like this great unique relationship that really feels specific to them. And I totally agree that he's known as this clinical, distant, kind of cold director. And I think the reason that The Fly and Dead Ringers are my favorite of his movies is that they don't come off that way to me at all, at least on that like character human level. Like he so nails the psychology and the vulnerability of these characters that, especially with The Fly, I think it's so easy to see this as a very human story, ironically. That I don't think in a lot of his movies, I don't think he totally nails the character human part, if I have like a criticism of some of his movies. And that's why I think he's really at like a peak here, because it is so just strangely moving. And the way that he rides that line, he makes it something that's kind of profound and emotional. And at the same time, you have Jeff Goldblum vomiting onto donuts and devouring them and peeling off his fingernails and squirting goo onto the mirror. It's like this gooey, mushy monster movie that somehow like gets right to the core of these pet themes of Cronenberg's. It's just such a weird magic trick to me, this movie.
Oh, for sure. If you can vomit on donuts and then make me want to cry at the end of the movie, like you're on another level, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what do you make, I guess, of this? Like, do you have a preferred reading of this movie? Because I've heard a lot over the years about it being like an AIDS metaphor, which I don't think that Cronenberg had, intentionally, but I guess it's a little hard to avoid just from around the time that it came out. But there's also all these anxieties about technology, about parenthood, about like illness or disease, or we talked about drug abuse. I kind of like how it's bendable enough that you could bring all those to it without necessarily having to label it as one thing. But I mean, what do you
I
guys think?
agree. I mean, I like that it's ambiguous. If I had to guess, I would say it's more about documenting illness and disease. That seems more like Cronenberg. I mean, would you consider Cronenberg a political filmmaker? I guess is a question because I mean, the insect
Hmm.
politics is like, there is a part of me that's like, is he trying to say that he's purposely not political too? Because in that world, I'm like, well, then it's not about AIDS. It's not about these bigger things. It's actually just a more simpler thing about this scientist documenting illness and disease. And it's much more of a like purely human thing as opposed to like a political thing. Um, but trying to
Yeah,
think.
in this case, I would agree. I mean, I think almost any piece of art is going to exist in some kind of political context that
Yeah.
you can. It's hard not to. But he does talk a lot about technology, and maybe reaching too far with it,
Yeah,
and
McLuhan
somehow how
stuff.
that fits into power structures.
I
But it depends what movie you're talking about, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, here I think the metaphors are real. It's real obvious. You can bring a bunch of metaphors of like decline, even if it's just like power or fame, greed, whatever it is. Something that starts awesome and ends poorly. I try and stay away from those. I feel like those are more useful if you need those. If you're like specifically maybe have a history with that or want to bring it here. I don't think you really need to though, which I think is a strength to the movie, is the tragedy still is is here even in just the brass tacks of the plot, which is that he did it. He got so close to like what the goal would be in the context of the movie, which is teleportation. He did it. But
Yeah.
because of this little stupid thing that a fly flew in, he has to have this horrible, not just like die, but have this horrible long decline, like have his face rubbed in the decline itself. Uh is just so nightmarish and sad. Uh that's probably my favorite element of the movie is just that the absurdity and like by a nose this becomes a tragedy rather than a victory.
I almost think that this is something they could show like in a sex ed class. Uh,
Oh
I mean, I
yeah.
guess you could,
Cautionary
you could,
tale.
yeah. I mean, you could take this as kind of a terrifying puberty metaphor, maybe. But it's more like the way that this movie starts out is all about him
I'm not
hitting on Gina
following that
Davis.
one. I guess so.
No, I mean that was just kind of a stray thought that I had, but I do like
It is
how
gooey.
all the things that happen in this movie are born out of him pursuing this love interest. Him revealing it in the first place to a journalist stupidly because he thinks he can just charm her, and then the whole night he makes his reckless, decision to experiment is because he thinks that she's cheating on him or that she's left him for the night. So it's like
Right.
Well,
so
that
much of this is wrapped us up in his libido.
see that's where I kind of, and maybe I'm not being very generous, but I got a little tripped up in that way of reading it. I don't think I'm supposed to read it that way, and it winds up making me like it being this whole like this man, an excuse for the man to show how complex he is, and like also his like tragedy before the woman, to be pitied before the woman. I don't know. I don't know. In my mind, it winds up being this sort of, for lack of a better word, Gen Z kind of critique that I don't really like. But I did kind of get caught in my head, and I wondered how much was here more than I don't know. I didn't love this as much as you guys, and maybe partially because of that, because it did feel like it was all about him winning the girl, and then the girl like even to the bitter end like pledging her love for him, and it's like it all just is about him. It's so much about him in this way. I don't know if I'm putting that correctly.
No,
but
I mean that's interesting. What's the moment that you started to kind of detach from him? Like where was there like a clear moment you were like, because I had
well,
that
from the
I just
get-go,
yeah.
it is this sort of, she thinks he's a nerd, and he is, but he's, it he wins her by like impressing her and all this stuff. Oh, this woman thinks she doesn't want this nerd guy, but she does, and everything, and it rolls on from there, and him continuing to convince her that he is more than she thinks he is, or something.
I mean, do you think there's some sort of I mean, are you thinking it's letting him off too easy or something? Because there are. I
I
think a
mean, the
lot of it.
guy turns into a goopy fly and gets shot at the end. I mean,
She
I
has
don't
to
think he
shoot
gets.
him.
I don't think he lets.
He doesn't get off. No,
He
it's
doesn't
it's
get
still
off
like really
easy.
tragic. It just feels like I don't know. I had this like weird idea that this was Cronenberg writing his like weird dream of like, boy, this lady would come in and she'd see how complex I am or something. I don't know. And it ends with her like, see, she's gonna have to kill me. It's so complex. I don't know. The
But
ending is
I
just
don't know. I would
so
say
intense too.
I feel like it's more of a critique of like the male ego and him wanting to prove himself to I don't know. I didn't get that feeling of like I'm a nerd. Why don't it's not like an incel like I didn't
No.
get that vibe really, I got it more of like um it's a young I mean, I would say it's like a younger man's mentality. I'm curious how old he was when he made this. Um but it's sort of different, clearly like his he kind of evolved in terms of like human relationships, I would say, but I'd be curious to know how old he was and if that had a reflection of it. But I hear you, is what I'm saying. I don't
Yeah, and
agree
I
with you,
mean,
but I hear you.
Yeah.
yeah, because I mean, he does act pretty, selfishly, obviously, at the end when he's trying to, merge them all into one body. I think you could see that as a critique of a certain male, almost like chauvinist fantasy or, thing of them all combining into one,
Well, by then
or
he's
him
clearly a
wanting her to have the
mess.
baby.
Yeah, he's
Um,
not trustworthy mentally at all at that point, and it's just all about her like seeing the train wreck, right? Um,
And that leads to another thing I always appreciate about this movie is we have this total like slime ball character of her ex-boyfriend who he kind of undergoes his own like transformation in the movie towards the end because she becomes like the only confidant that she has that she can talk to, and he does kind of end up looking out for her in the end at great expense.
Great
In
Yeah.
that final scene,
Yeah.
because he is kind of an over the top asshole, for most of the movie, and so I always
He's
kind of
so
appreciate
gross.
how at the end he does. Cronenberg's not afraid to put him in kind of a semi-heroic position, which is unusual for a character like that.
Oh
But that's always
god.
just kind of a side note that I always appreciate.
Yeah.
And again,
Yeah,
these
I
are like the
appreciated
only
that
three
too.
characters,
Yep.
Just the
Oh,
moment where super creature version of the fly, that last incarnation of the fly is just like dragging its weird metal fused body, and then it like pulls the gun to its head, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, like
isn't that so like
Oh,
sad?
it's
it's
so
so
sad.
sad.
Just like,
It's
please
so
kill me,
sad.
love of my
It's like
life.
so pathetic. And yeah, especially just something about it just dragging its mangled, melded with the teleporter body.
That cutaway shot of the weird tail, metal tail flopping. I don't know why that sticks in my memory every time I see it. But
Oh
yeah, I
man,
mean
that
that
is probably one of the cooler things in the movie, that he merges with the computer. The computer
yeah.
gets so confused that it's like, we're gonna mash the pod with the guy and the fly.
And how's there's some symbolism for you for melt melding with technology and
Ew.
just becoming this pitiable, disgusting thing that just needs its head blown off.
Yeah.
I remember reading somewhere that, and I don't know if I have this totally right, but that this dream fantasy that or this nightmare that she has about getting an abortion and it comes out as this giant larva was originally supposed to be how they ended the movie as like an epilogue.
Yeah, on the Blu-ray they shot it.
end,
They
question
shot
mark.
it too. You could see it on the Blu-ray. It's a weird
Is it
scene.
different than what we see in
no, it's
as a
kind of
nightmare?
if I'm remembering it correctly, it's like you see that like this thing. What is it? I think she's in bed with the other dude and they have the weird the weird larva creature, and you're like, oh, they're a family now. And so imagine that.
Oh, that's interesting.
Imagine that coming after creature puts a gun to his fucking head and says, kill me. And then it fades and it's like, do. You know, there's birds in the window and their family in bed, you know, like, I think that was it. And no wonder it didn't work.
Yeah, I think they made the right call to just
and it's
cut it off
interesting
there.
too, because Mel Brooks produced this and purposely wanted Cronenberg to do this movie and was just like, listen, I know I'm Mel Brooks, but I want you to be Cronenberg. So go full Cronenberg on this. Like, don't hold back, which I thought was so cool. There was someone, I forget who else was attached to it, but I guess this Cronenberg was supposed to do Total Recall. That was supposed to be like his movie that, and at this time, and then it fell apart. And now Mel Brooks somehow connected with him, and he did The Fly, and he was kind of desperate because he was tied up in development hell on Total Recall for like a year. But I often think about like, what would a Total Recall movie look like with with David Cronenberg?
Wow, I can kind of imagine. I mean, I can see the component parts in there.
Yeah,
of what could
For
have been a
real.
Cronenberg movie, but I don't see Arnold Schwarzenegger being in it.
No, not at all. And that probably would have been a problem because I think the producer was like, it's got to be, it's got to be him. But yeah. So he's in a weird point, and I often feel like filmmakers kind of do interesting stuff when they're forced into this predicament. Like I'm a big fan of After Hours, and he also had a similar experience when Passion of the, or what's it called? Temptation of Christ fell apart. Yeah. So he was kind of forced into this corner to do this. And I feel like there's something about that where, I don't know, filmmakers are kind of forced to do something maybe really great. And for me, After Hours is like a top 10 movie, and along with The Fly. But yeah, I just wanted to give you that little tidbit.
Yeah,
I like it.
I got my Cronenberg on Cronenberg book next to me.
Yeah.
Like a nerd. Hey. And let me just turn to that chapter. No.
Let us all turn in our
But yeah, no, it does feel like a lot of different things just kind of coming together in the right time and place, because besides, having Jeff Goldblum pop so much in this movie, it did end up being like a commercial hit, and it won the Oscar for best makeup, which is totally deserved and awesome.
Yeah, who else was doing this much work that year, man?
Yeah. And that Howard Shore score, I want to give a shout out to that too. I mean, you mentioned the operatic music and everything, but it adds such this extra, layer of tragic bombast on top of it, which is another weird kind of dissonance with the topic, the subject matter.
It gets so operatic by the end. Like, even just in the, again, for me, a little bit to a fault, where it feels like a crazy Shakespeare play where the guy is trying to save his child, and there's another man trying to keep him away from her, and it's just like all these crisscrossing, like he's like Quasimodo.
I love the Shakespearean aspects of this, the monologues to each other about life. I feel like this is the kind of thing that maybe Shakespeare would have thought about, or the way he would have framed this kind of story, in this philosophical way, I guess. Yeah, I dig it. But I'll just make that my final thought, I guess. Yeah, I love this movie. I always have. And I really do feel like this is like Cronenberg at the top of his powers. And well, we'll talk about Dead Ringers too, because that's also one that I'm quite fond of. But
Yeah.
I'd say it's a toss up as far as my favorite from him. And I know people again watching it today might be surprised at how like bleak and heavy it is, but also kind of silly at the same time. But I think it stands the test of time that way. But anything more you wanted to add, Seth, before we let Bobby have the final word on The Fly?
Yeah. Again,
Why you hated it so much?
Yeah. Why'd you hate it so much?
I'm just like at like a 3.5 or something, and I didn't expect. I guess I didn't know people loved the shit out of this. I didn't know. I knew Videodrome and Dead Ringers, which I do love very much. To spoil the next part of this episode, but it's when I don't know. It was just so first like had a hokiness that was kind of I kind of found endearing, but still like never let up, and it was almost too hokey. And then it was just punishing, like it was like weird science, but Lars von Trier or something. Which
whoa, sign me up.
I know, but I don't want that necessarily, because a lot of the times Lars von Trier is like too much for me. It just felt punishing by the end, just for the sake of punishing, and like just a bummer for the sake of being a bummer. Which I was just, I don't know. I was just a little bummed, and maybe I'm just protective of Seth characters and all that. Maybe that's what's going on. I don't know. And maybe I just felt a little pressure because I was like, oh yeah, this people really, really love this, and I'm kind of just okay on it.
It's okay. This is a safe space.
Thank you, Bobby.
Like
but not as soon as we hit stop and I see you in real life.
Keep me away from Marc, Bobby.
But yeah, anything else we didn't touch on or that you wanted to say about this one, Bobby?
I don't know. You know, I think it's one of those movies. Like when I was going on the film festival circuit and doing Q&As and blah blah blah, and I'd say The Fly was my favorite. I feel like there's something slightly unhip about it in terms of like, oh, why didn't you say Videodrome or something like that? But for me, just in terms of just the pure, and I know it is a bummer at the end, but in terms of just pure enjoyment, for me, there's like, it's this when it comes to Cronenberg. Although I will say, I don't know if this is a hot take, Existence has been slowly creeping up in my list as a movie I just enjoy watching.
That's one of the 3 or so that I have not seen, and I really wanted to see that.
Yeah, well, maybe next time, guys. But yeah, that's one that's been slow. But as I get older, you know, I'm 75, and as in my old age, I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to pretend that I like Videodrome as much as other people do. I like The Fly, man. Give me The Fly. Give me Cronenberg and Jeff Goldblum's parts falling off in the bathroom. That's sign me up.
I'm a Videodrome skeptic myself, so
yeah. Now that I'm 85,
we're kind of on there.
I'm going to admit that I don't like The Fly as much as everybody else. So we're all being honest here.
This is healing. It's about time. It took us a while to actually get honest with each other.
Yeah,
this is good.
It happened. I feel good about this.
Yeah.
Well, maybe Seth won't be so negative about our next film, which was his follow-up to The Fly. Right, just a few years later, Dead Ringers, which is based on a book called Twins, which I have not read, but also like actually inspired by a true case of actual like renowned twin gynecologists who were both, spoiler alert, found dead in their apartment in strange drug-fueled circumstances.
Oh, I didn't know that. It is based on a true story. Holy shit.
Obviously, this is a very fictionalized imagining of what might have gone on between them. But yeah, they were actual Stuart and Cyril Marcus are their name. Go ahead and Wikipedia it. And they died in similar circumstances. And so if this seems like a crazy, outlandish premise, which it kind of is, it was inspired by something that actually came from real life.
We are really into getting to the end of these movies first.
I know.
Yeah. Well, maybe it doesn't end like the true story.
Maybe we're lying the whole podcast.
But But I can just imagine him pitching like okay, this is my new idea for the next movie.
Mm-hmm.
And just follow me here. Twin gynecologists played by the same actor. And
I heard he kept on being able to sell it really well until he got to the gynecologist part. That's like, everybody was like, can they be lawyers? Can they do anything else?
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
mainly men executives saying,
of course. Yeah, this makes me squeamish. I mean, Jeremy Irons is so fucking good in this. And it's funny. It's like
amazing.
It's that same thing. It's the same trick he's doing in The Fly, where like this, for the bulk of the movie, is like a domestic drama about twins. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I'm here for it. Like, I'm so on board with that movie. And then Cronenberg's going to Cronenberg.
A two-hander, played by one hand.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah, I think that's a good place to start, is because, this is one of those movies where every shot is kind of composed and orchestrated so that we have the same actor, appearing to be in the same room with himself. And I totally agree that this is honestly, like, I think one of the greatest achievements as far as a film performance I've ever seen. It's completely seamless. And the way that these two look identical, there's no effort whatsoever to make them look visually distinguished from each other. And even in the performance, it's all really subtle things that he does to differentiate them. And yet, even though there were a couple times where I kind of had to get my bearings of oh wait, which one is it supposed to be? For the most part, it was like I could always tell. And it was with him doing so little. It's incredible. And for it to, obviously we know that, he's looking at the back of, someone else's head is in the foreground, or it's a composite shot where they're both in it. But after a while, I just totally forget about that stuff. And they really seem to be playing off each other. It's amazing.
And I'm forgetting the kind of the weaker of the two, the name, but
Beverly.
He's Beverly, yeah. He's Beverly. Just so he's just so heartbreaking to watch. And yeah, I mean that was the thing. Watching it this second time, I think I anticipated the bad stuff sooner, and I was kind of like, oh wow, this really plays for a long time as this kind of drama. And
it kind of faked me out too, in a way that I feel like I misremembered it. I mean, I was pretty young when I first saw this, so it had been a while. I think I simplified it too in a way that it did it a disservice, which was, it's not so easy to say that there is the good twin and the bad twin, or even the weaker twin who has less of an upper hand over the other. It is, as it goes along, there is the more charming, I don't know, gets whatever the hell he wants and goes out and does it twin. And then there's the alpha twin, Ellie. And then Beverly is, at least at the beginning, seems to be, we're almost led to believe that he is under control of this stronger twin or something like that. Or he is just beaten into submission or something almost. But it's not true. And after a while, it becomes his presence that becomes more monstrous, coming from this interesting place of how someone who is sensitive and who is more emotional can be abusive in their own way and be out of control in their own way, by being so sensitive and being falling so hard in love with somebody, or being so controlling and all this. It is an interesting back and forth where by the end, it almost feels like the strong American Psycho one is kind of pancaked by the one who we thought was shivering in the corner, kind of.
So how did you? Sorry, I was just going to say, how do you feel about that? Because it's funny, because we talked about The Fly and kind of you bumped on the relationship there. How did you feel about it here? Because to me, he's sort of critical of naive young love. If we were saying Beverly is inhabiting that emotion, that he's kind of devastated in a way that's not uh commiserate with what the experiences he's having. Does that make sense? Like, did you find this less, like, in terms of that relationship, more realistic or less like an issue with it?
Uh, yeah, I mean, this felt very much like it was written into the character that we are meant to see that the character is wrong in his
Yeah.
interpretation. Like it's like at the very it's clearly a paranoid place that this guy is coming from, that he at the first little bit of uh like some guy answers the phone when it should have been his girlfriend, he destroys his life and his twin's
Yeah.
life basically
Yeah.
in a matter of weeks. It is clearly like he has a monstrous kind of void in him that like once it starts rolling, it just eats and eats and eats. But yeah, it's in a way that seems very unique to this character, not really a type necessarily.
And this love interest character herself is, considerably damaged. I mean, you could argue that she's like the one who gets him into these drugs that eventually control his life and
She's
kill
really
him.
interesting. Yeah.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think she's a really interesting character because of that she is like vulnerable, but she is at the same time being totally used, by the two of them who are switching places. And that scene where she finally confronts them in the restaurant and like those horrible things that Elliot says to her, uh, like you feel for her, but she's still drawn to come back, and it doesn't
Mhm.
feel simple. Um, you know, they all feel kind of uh, dysfunctional in that way with each other.
Right,
But
because she's
really,
also
what?
kind of masochistic. She likes
Mhm.
punishment in a sexual sort of way, and all this. So she also sort of, I don't know, yeah, she can't keep away from the weirdness, the wildness. But it does seem like she is wanting to find. She's actually found some normalcy through Ellie falling in love with her in such a head over heels sort of way, which before this I think she was more prone to going after, um going after the brother who is more sexually virile and like an American Psycho or whatever. And all of a sudden she's really into this guy, and she's like, all right, we're gonna get it together here, we're having a good time, and I don't need this other guy. I don't like, which she is like denying that part of herself and whatever, she's wanting a more stable kind of relationship. So if anything, it's like it's a bummer she goes away, and then the guy she was sort of, I don't know, found this in explodes. Um,
And Beverly's undoing, it's not even so much her as just that he has that line where Elliot's trying to get him to tell him about the sex, and he says, "I just want to keep this one like for myself." And it turns out like for some reason, him trying to break apart and make his own identity makes him completely dissociate. And
right,
I
he
was
can't
kind of
handle it.
expecting,
It's like
right?
he's literally like can't breathe. Like he's suddenly out of the spaceship and in space now. It's like, whoa, get me back there in a way, but he
Mhm.
can't get back because I think there was an equilibrium that they were at that the other brother does talk about, right? It does talk about it in sort of a mystical kind of way, but it does seem like that's what they're into. They're all like, everything is sorted out and mechanized, and that's how it's going to work, and it has to go a certain way. And then when it doesn't, everything breaks.
And what's interesting is you might expect that Elliot is going to sabotage it, and and that he's going to be the one who triggers this and brings him down. But really, Beverly does it all on his own, becoming addicted and like crazy jealous. And Elliot almost once like offers even to help get them back together. And but instead, he has this complete meltdown, and then the way the focus starts to shift over to Elliot, because the other character has become completely kind of unintelligible at that point, and you see that he is just as codependent on his twin the as Beverly is, and that I think that's just really cool to explore that he doesn't end up playing this role necessarily of one being good and one being bad. They both have this weird metaphysical connection that's never really explained, right? Like they have all these weird ideas about the body and the inside of the body being beautiful, but then Beverly being convinced that the inside of bodies are wrong somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure, like metaphorically necessarily, how that links up with all of the other issues that are going on. But I like that mystery.
It's weird that you guys talking right now. I'm like, I wonder if this for Cronenberg was almost a reaction to The Fly, because it's almost like an inverse of the relationships there. You know, where it's like in The Fly, it's very clear, kind of a old Hollywood mentality, like you were talking about Seth, where it's like, this is my girl and you're a bad guy. And da, da, da. Whereas this one, the relationship feels a little more modern in that she's my girl and I'm going to destroy everything, which feels more contemporary to me in a way of it being someone who's more self-destructive of the relationship. But do you what do you guys feel the link between these movies are? Am I full of shit? I could be full of shit. You can be
Well, I
honest.
think the link is you can still see both of these. I think it's not as one to one because I think um to make a metaphor happen in something like Dead Ringers, because I think it operates on a lot more. I don't know what's going on has so much going on. There's so many layers going on with it, with the plotting and everything. But I suppose you can still, with either movie, they did remind me of each other because yeah, by the end, the there is this there's equilibrium and it's broken, and by the end it is like just a mess, and then it's just like everything is destroyed, and like even to the point there is a link between their layers, right? The lab and the gynecology office that they have. By the end, both of them are these drug pads that are just absolutely
Mhm.
smashed, and you can't even get through the door.
Yeah, I think they both, that the main characters in the two movies have this kind of idea of either transcendence or improving things or innovating on things, um, when they can't get their interpersonal shit together. So maybe I think I said earlier that I kind of see both of these as like doomed love stories, and I think maybe that's the connection. Even
Mhm.
though The Fly is more overtly about, technology and that kind of and existential things, in the end, the downfall of both people is very much wrapped up in their relationships with like the one person that they're closest with. Like we said, this one has, like, this movie has more characters, but it still feels very much like a kind of psychodrama between two people, in a way I think The Fly kind of does too. So as these kind of just tragic like love stories where we end up, in this one them dying together and the other one, one having to kill the other.
Yeah,
Yeah, I guess that's the connection for me.
yeah. That I don't know. Is it safe to talk about the ending?
Sure, let's
Is it
do
too
it.
soon? So when I first saw this in college, that ending fucked me up for like a month. And I don't and it's funny because maybe it was just early in my Cronenberg watching that and I was trying, and it didn't affect me as strongly this time. And I was trying to figure out why that was. And I think it is because of this rope a dope he does in making you really care about these characters so much. And I think the first time I just was not expecting, and the shot I'm talking about is, I actually think it's not the very last shot, but it's when he's just kind of wandering around like a wounded animal, making like little noises after his brother's dead. And
He's
it's
just
kind of
saying
in a
his
wide
name
shot.
over and over again.
Yeah. And that haunted me for like a month when I first saw it. Um, and then watching it again, the way that's set up with the story, I think it's like 15 minutes later, he's recounting a story about was it a bird or some sort of about like was it a baby bird that like loses his brother? There's something that sets up that ending in a way that
Oh, that yeah, right. It's that he died of fright when he looked at his
yes.
dead twin in the
Yes.
story.
Yeah.
And here we see him wandering around, and he never we see in the background the dead body, and he just will not look at it.
Yeah.
Even though it slowly dawns us that he has seen it. He knows it's there. He if anything, it's like dawning on him like, oh, I remember. But it's like he's trying to make it not so somehow, which is exactly how like I imagine you would kind of try to react like in a horrible situation like that, or you would be like, it's a dream, like maybe I can reverse this by it not happening somehow, I can deny this into nothingness. But it's so sad. I agree, so
Yeah.
sad.
Yeah, I mean, they
fuck
really
me
do
up.
have similar endings in the way it's kind of like the, death and then fade out and doesn't give you anything else to hang on to after that point. Uh, and also, I think Howard Shore does the music for this one
Yeah,
too, right?
it's incredible. Another incredible
Mhm.
score.
Really good.
Yeah, and it has a very similar effect to me. But it's interesting that, The Fly is, I think, and a lot of his other movies are more comfortably like feel like genre movies,
Hmm.
where this one doesn't necessarily have a clear, even a hook besides twin gynecologist one starts losing his mind. And but it still does have a plenty of like queasy scenes in it that it's
Hmm.
not necessarily gore, but like every time I watch that scene where he's like giving a gynecological exam to this lady who you could see like the pain in her face,
Yeah.
and he just like won't listen to her, and she's afraid to say anything, is like almost as painful as anything in The Fly for me to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to like
And when he ends up in the surgery room, like having a
oof.
meltdown where it looks like
Hmm.
he's might actually like mutilate somebody in front of all of his colleagues is like, oh my God.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
barely actually uses the tools like that they make, because he has these wild ideas once he really loses his mind. The drug addicted brother, he builds these crazy gynecology tools that look like they're out of like a witch's house in the Middle Ages or something. These silver instruments that are like claws, and those are haunting and scary just in themselves. In this like Chekhov's gun way of just like just them being there and you imagining what can be done with them.
Hmm.
Like even though he barely even uses them by the end of the movie, like we don't even really see him do much with them. It's just them being there is enough, which I think is kind of interesting and wild.
Yeah, my recollection of the movie was that those were more central to the movie, and then watching it again, I was like, yeah, like you said, it's just it being in the background. It's a looming menace in the background is enough.
And there's I think a lot less levity in this than in The Fly.
Yes.
But every
sure.
time that I watch that scene where he is like raving on the phone to who he thinks is having sex with his girlfriend, and is this just like gay assistant,
Mhm.
like flamboyantly gay assistant who is just horrified at him graphically talking about her mutant genitals, like I just laugh my ass off.
Yeah.
But at first
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
It's
like,
so funny.
"Is that you, Bernard?
Is that you, Byron? And Beverly just does not get it.
Yeah, yeah. He's too far gone.
And that opening when they're little kids too. I always forget about that. I love
Yeah.
that little opening.
Will you have sex with us?"
What? For an experiment.
It's
Yeah.
So yeah,
wild.
I want to say going into this, I wasn't quite settled on what my favorite Cronenberg movie was, but I think I actually would give this a little heads up over The Fly. This just seems like such a unique and at times unclassifiable, weird thing in that perfect Cronenbergian way that also still isn't quite like any of his other movies. And again, this just so nails everything on a psychological and conceptual level, which is usually where I part ways with a lot of other movies that are beloved by him that I'm a little more critical of. And then again, just Jeremy Irons in this should be given some kind of a Nobel Peace Prize acting award or something because
That's a
it's
thing, right?
Yeah, I feel like he might have like broke himself or something.
More than
Probably,
an
probably needed
Oscar.
some therapy at the end of just like splitting his personas, burrowing into himself in this way. anyone just inhabiting either of these characters would have a hard time, I think, inhabiting them both, and it being so particularly about how they look. So therefore, it is you, the actor, like looking at yourself and acting with yourself. Very strange experience it must have been.
And a lot of credit to Cronenberg and the editor for doing a lot of the, heavy lifting with making it seamless too, and conceiving of shots in a way that would make that possible. I would have to imagine this whole thing would have had to been so intricately mapped out.
And it never draws attention to itself. So they're like,
Mhm.
oh,
Yeah.
they better cover up his face in this one or whatever. Nope.
Yeah. It's rewatching it. I had the same thing it's hard for me to overthrow The Fly because I just have so much attachment to it. But to me, this is definitely in the top tier. And it's because I'm so caught up in the human relationship story between the brothers. It's just so compelling to me. I could watch 7 hours of it. No, I don't know.
That would be well. Hey, there is a miniseries like
Right.
adaptation
Oh,
of
right,
this.
right.
So if you want more, I'm kind of interested. I've heard good things about it.
Mhm.
Yeah,
They
I
have
haven't checked it
female main
out.
characters,
Well, I guess we'll have
and
to check it
yeah,
out.
maybe I will.
Yeah,
I think it's on Amazon.
They know now no one would ever hire identical twin gynecologists.
Not males, no.
Mm-mm.
That's scandalous.
Not males.
Yeah.
Ladies now.
Yeah.
But,
All right. Well, it sounds like you
yeah,
like this
there's
one
just-
more than The Fly, then, Seth.
Yeah. Oh my God. I think this is definitely his best movie for me. Just on a narrative level, it's just so engrossing. There's so much to chew on. Like even down like beyond the two brothers, the lady who's caught in between them is given so much to do, and like there's so much to chew on there. That's so like wild and fits in with the whole thing. There's also just like the insane like I don't know. It's not something you see very often in a big movie like this with a big Hollywood actor, where it's like it's a twin brother who does want to fuck himself. As that whole scene where he's trying to get his brother to be in a threesome with
Mhm.
him. It's just like you don't see this every day.
No, you
It's
don't.
like some real Freudian acid trip, bad news, real bummer trip.
And you loved it.
And I loved it. Yeah, mainly, but yeah, and I mean, I try and like, I guess because there is so much to it. That's like really my problem with a more somber, like intensely melancholic. Like, it does end tragic. It is a minor key movie for sure, but I think there's more to it than suffering, or just torture of the characters. So this one, I don't know, is like what I would hold to some of the Lars von Trier's that I don't care for as much, or movies of that sort.
Yeah, I like where it's the filmmaker is cruel just to be cruel to its
Mhm.
characters. I think Cronenberg loves his characters, and yeah.
He does, yeah. As much as you can love the characters that you mutate and blow their heads off.
Sure.
Yeah. But you have to love them.
And they all have
So,
similar,
yeah.
like they kind of look like David Cronenberg. I think this has been pointed
Mhm.
out before. He loves leading men that
Yeah, I've
have
always
this like
thought that.
kind of stretchy looking skin, big chin, nose, big old
James
nose. I don't
Woods.
know. James Woods,
Mhm.
Goldblum, Irons, even
Even
has a
Viggo
little bit of that.
Mortensen, I guess, in
Yeah.
the newer movies, has a
Mhm.
little bit of that. I'm sure he's a lot sexier than David Cronenberg, but
These are just the adventures
Hey, how
of
dare
who
you?
isn't?
David.
All right. Well, did we do justice to that, Bobby? Did you have anything we didn't get to with Dead Ringers or The Fly?
No, I think I feel pretty good about this.
Yeah, me too.
I feel like I
was
have
kind
3
of curious.
ventricles now.
Yeah, a heart in each one.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have.
I learned a
triplets.
lot,
Yeah.
I learned a lot about myself.
Yeah, I learned a lot about you too.
Yeah.
You haven't seen The Fly 2, have you? Because I'm kind of right on the precipice of watching that out of curiosity. I know Seth hasn't seen it.
I mean, it is a curiosity, I would say. I mean, it's got some fun effects. It's not The Fly. You know what I mean? Like it's
Right.
but I don't know. If you got nothing else to do, that's my endorsement. If you got nothing else to do,
that's on the
check
poster.
it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I didn't do well. Honestly, I think the marketing was bad for it.
Mm-hmm. People thought like, well, what if I do have something else to do?
Right.
Yeah.
Once you get in people's heads.
What else do you have to do?
If there was a Dead Ringers 2, though, I would definitely be checking that out out of curiosity.
They're just
I'm not
ghosts.
sure where you go with that.
Return of the Twins. I don't think it could have a better opening credits sequence, though. It's one of my favorite opening credit sequences with all the just red background. Everything looks like a paperback from that time. It feels like all those medieval paintings and stuff or whatever, etchings. So creepy.
All right. Well, Bobby, before we let you go, we do like to ask our guests what their favorite film is. Not to put you on the spot or anything, but I'm going to ask you to declare what your number one favorite film of all time is.
We sometimes forget.
God.
I remembered this time.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, and sometimes it's better to be put on the spot because you really just have to go straight to your soul. And remember that you're committed to this for the rest of your life.
Okay. Well, it's funny because I think Seth will have a problem with this movie for the relationship of the movie. But for me, the kind of game-changing movie for me was Terry Gilliam's Brazil in terms of the tone of that movie and the weird dark comedy and the dystopian of it all. I think that's it for me.
Oh man, that's one of my favorite movies. Yeah.
Oh, but you don't have a problem with the central like that he's pining over this dream girl
Well, in
I'm
that
putting
one,
you on the spot now. Spotlight's on you now.
I know.
Oh, he just exposed you. So you do love The
This
Fly.
is a
We've
long
proved
con.
it.
I just blew no.
No, that one seems totally different because I don't know. It is a dream at the end. By the end, it is interspersed with him sort of being delusioned, and even his interactions with this woman are mostly the reality is she like kind of shoves him out of the truck, right?
Yeah.
But in his mind, they fly away, and he's she's an angel, and everything's great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Brazil is a good segue back into Situation Nowhere. From what I understand, sounds like that was an inspiration, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay. So if that sounds tantalizing to anybody listening, please go to situationnowhere.com, pre-order, and get excited for it. Is there anything else that besides that you wanted to point out? Is there any are you moving on to the literary world now, or do you still have film projects that are kind of floating around?
I gotta be honest, it's really intoxicating to be able to write a thing and put it out instead of trying begging people to make a movie. I have another idea that's actually very Cronenberg, very body horror that I'd like to write next, but I think I might. I mean, here's the great irony, right? Is that I write this novel and it gets in the hands, someone reads it and was like, oh, I know a film and TV agent for this. So the irony is that this novel will probably get read as an idea for a potential movie or TV show. Probably more likely that will happen than if I were to write an original script because it exists in a different format. It's now IP, which is crazy to me. But I think that's the true irony is that I wrote this book starting in the pandemic when I became a dad, and I was like, is film over? Everything fell apart. All these movies I was attached to fell apart. And I was like, I have to have an outlet for, I need to get this out of me. So I started writing this book, and it's like, what is the insect politics? It's like I dreamt of being no, I don't know. I'm trying to tie it back together.
You just
trying to tie it back together.
It was a book that dreamt of being a movie, but
but yeah. So I don't know. Who knows? if someone was like, hey, this book would make a great limited series, I'd be like, okay, cool. I'm back, baby. But right now, I gotta say, I really love I love being able to write whatever I want and putting it out. And the folks, I'm not gonna lie to you, responsive has been pretty good to it. I'm not gonna lie to you. I got some blurbs in recently. I'm like, hey.
That's
I think did I see a Rainn Wilson blurb?
Yeah.
On the thing you sent me?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it's so I'm excited about it. But who knows? Who knows what the future will hold?
All right. Well, maybe we'll cross paths again someday when you have something else out there to promote, because this was a blast. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
And for picking such great movies. We usually talk about some real garbage on here.
Well, yeah.
Listen, I will come back to talk garbage with you guys.
All right.
Yeah, thank you very much. Bring the garbage. Yeah.
This was refreshing, depressing, bleak movies.
And it helps
right
me
kind.
Finally accept Marc for who he is, a guy who is in love with his identical twin and wants to have sex with his identical twin and his girlfriend at the same time. And what you guys do in the privacy of your own home is fine by me.
I vomit on all my food before I eat it.
I'm still working on that part of you, Marc. I want to let it in, but I can't.
Well, we don't have to eat together. Anyways, Bobby, thanks for joining us. Everybody, thanks for listening. Check your telepods for flies in the future. PSA. Unwatchables is produced by Tony Scarpitti, hosted by me, Marc Dottavio, and Seth Troyer, with artwork by Micah Kraus. You can find Seth and I on Letterboxd under Marc Dottavio and Sloth Troyer. You can also check us out at unwatchablespod.com for links to our Twitter and Instagram, or support us on Patreon for bonus content and to have a say in what we watch. Thanks for listening.